Greetings, and thank you for joining us today. I am John White, Director of the Cybersecurity Research Program at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, which is the U.S. Department of Energy's premier laboratory for renewable energy. At NREL, we are supporting the transformation to a decarbonized grid in a way that's secure and resilient by design. The Biden administration's net zero goals are creating an unprecedented transformation of our energy system, from deployment at large-scale renewable energy systems and electrified transportation to solar panels, high-efficiency HVAC systems, and EV chargers in the places that we work, shop, and live. These changes are helping us move to adopt net zero practices while enjoying the enhanced comfort and resilience provided by these new clean energy devices. However, along with this change comes new cyber risks that must be managed for a highly distributed system with complex ownership and a significant rise in the quantity of devices to secure. With this knowledge, today we'll be introducing a report development effort that NREL and 7 of our leading national laboratories are leading on behalf of the DOE Office of Cybersecurity, Energy Security, and Emergency Response, or better known as CESER. I'm excited to be joined today by 2 tremendous speakers. First, Mara Nguyen is CESER's Deputy Director of Preparedness Policy and Risk Analysis, where she supports energy sector security and resilience through coordination with DOE's government and industry partners. Prior to joining DOE, Mara was the Associate Director of Planning Coordination at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agencies, or CESA's National Risk Management Center within the Department of Homeland Security. Mara has over 20 years of experience in the areas of risk management, radiological and nuclear detection, transportation security, and immigration. Second, Jordan Henry is NREL's Chief Cybersecurity Engineer within the Energy Security and Resilience Center. Jordan leads NREL's cybersecurity research strategy and is maturing the portfolio to ensure technical rigor and strengthen relationships with public and private partners. Jordan has over a decade's worth of experience working within national security for critical infrastructure systems in OT cyber defense, threat assessment, and mitigation. He worked for Sandia National Labs before joining us at NREL. Let me first turn to Mara, who can help introduce us to CESER's priorities, its role in developing this report, and how CESER is supporting the secure and resilient transition to the future electric grid. Mara?
Thank you, John, for the very nice introduction. I'm very excited to be here with everyone today because we are seeing a change in our energy systems. And so this work is so vital for us to understand. If you want to go to the next slide. So I am not sure that everyone knows what CESER is. And you might be, how does this connect into the purpose of this report? Well, CESER's mission is really focusing on the security of the US critical energy infrastructure. All of the energy infrastructure that allows us to flip a switch and not even consider, question a light turning on, go to the gas pump and get our car filled up with gas, ensure that all of our daily operations that are so built on our energy system in the US get to continue without even thinking about it. This takes a lot of planning and preparation in order to make that be a regular reality that we are all very happy to have today. The energy sector is really unique. It's got generation sources, transmission lines, distribution set lines, refineries, pipelines, and markets managing supply and demand. The electric grid is often considered the world's largest machine. And this machine is complex, right? It has IT networks and OT networks and sensors and other monitoring capabilities to ensure that we're able to provide reliable power. DOE offers that depth of knowledge where rightfully so CESER offers breadth. We work right now to say, how do we look at the specific energy sector risks and make sure that we are setting up the sector for success in the long run, being able to mitigate those risks. Those include concerns with cyber threats, climate risks, physical threats, electromagnetic pulse and geomagnetic disturbances, and supply chain. The Department of Energy is working with not only our 3,000 electric companies in the US alone, along with the numerous oil and natural gas companies, but also the suppliers to those companies. We worry about the entire supply chain to make sure that our system is being built in the most reliable way. We do this through working on policies training, workforce development, research and development, and response efforts. If you go to the next slide. So CESER has a mission to enhance the security of the US critical infrastructure from all hazards, as you heard me say. And really, we need to look at increasing the visibility of threats, targeting critical energy infrastructure. And this is one of the mechanisms by our communication, by our collaboration. We talked about the supply chain, right? And it's not just about the utilities and the oil and natural gas owners and operators, but it's also about all of the components that make that up. We have IT and OT more integrated into our system than ever before, and we need to make sure that it's secure, reliable, and resilient going forward, because there's swift and informed actions that we can take to make sure that those are in place. But we need to make sure that it's designed in from the beginning, right? So that's the implementing secure and resilience by design. It is a lot easier and a lot more cost effective if we implement those practices and policies while we're designing in our system. That's one of the importance of this report that we're talking about today, because if we can look to see where our distribution system is growing and changing, then we can make sure that we are designing in that security and resilience in the most cost-effective, most operationally effective manner. And that's really critical to seeing that outcome and success. We want a capability build for states, locals, tribal and territorial partners, government and industry, because they're the ones on the ground doing the day in and day out effort to prepare for and respond to energy system threats. We worry about the planning. We worry about making sure there are solutions in place. And when incidents do occur, we have to lead the safe and effective restoration of the US energy system. So whether it's a hurricane or a cyber attack or a major storm coming through, all hazards is the perspective that we bring to the table in CESER to make sure that our energy infrastructure is secure. Next slide, please. So why do we do this at CESER? Why is it CESER who has this mission space? Well, CESER is known as the SRMA. SRMA means Sector Risk Management Agency. We are the entity within the federal government that has the obligation, that has the responsibility to care and focus in on the risk management for the energy sector. There are 16 critical functions. If you like to look at policy, you can read PPD 21. Energy is clearly one of the 16 and the underpinning of so much of the rest of our critical infrastructure. You can't run a hospital if you don't have electricity. You can't have government functions if you don't have electricity. All of these things are built upon it. So we take our role as the Sector Risk Management Agency very seriously because we know that the rest of our nation depends on it. We do this through representing sector-specific interests in our national cybersecurity strategy, making sure that as our world changes and cyber is a bigger component, both for advancements, but also for threats and vulnerabilities, that we take into account the nuances of the energy sector. We also lead the sector incident management response. We're the ones that coordinate amongst all the different bodies having to deal with response during an emergency. We provide technical and logistic support to the energy sector. So when things do go awry, when something is a threat or a problem, and whether the government recognizes it first or industry recognizes it first, we come to the table to make sure that we can resolve and mitigate those issues quickly and effectively. And we also support CISA's role as the National Cyber Response Coordinator. We know the cascading impacts of having challenges in the energy sector and how this can cause problems across all 16 of those critical functions. And we want to make sure that we are at the table providing the best engagement possible so that our sector is able to be strong and resilient and secure, and we can count on that as a nation. So thank you so much for your time today. I'm going to hand it over to John to take us from here.
Thank you for that, Mara, and thank you for everything you're doing on behalf of the CESER office, as well as the Department of Energy and the nation. Obviously, such a challenging time right now as we're transforming the energy system so rapidly, so much great opportunity to do really important, impactful cybersecurity and cyber resilience work. And so on that note, I'd like to kind of boil down a little bit from this big view of energy transformation and security and resilience and missions, a little bit more into the domain of this report. And so probably one of the first places to start is to really understand when we say energy transformation, what is it that we're really talking about, right? And so most of us all are really comfortable with the bulk power system, so traditional sources of generation and the transmission and distribution system all the way to the consumer. But one kind of key parts of this report is really to understand how is this system changing. And so again, understanding that large scale renewables are being added, again, on the transmission at that bulk power size where you see large scale wind plants and solar plants and geothermal plants and storage systems, but also the other end of it, which is the distribution system, or what's known as the grid edge or behind the meter, where all these devices are coming into the places that we work, our homes, our neighborhoods. And so all of these devices, whether they control, thermostats, or they charge your electric vehicle, or you have photovoltaics on your home or in your businesses or on commercial campuses, all of those things are changing the system and helping us achieve these goals for decarbonization. But along with those systems, right, is a connectivity and a control authority that we didn't necessarily have in the prior system. And so the key piece of this report is really trying to understand, what does this transformation mean for cybersecurity? How do we prioritize, and what do we do about those changes? I mean, obviously we can consider large consequences, like the quantity of devices being added, or who owns these devices, or where these devices are coming from. And so again, all of that is what's really key to our interest in electric distribution systems, and really the core focus of this report. And again, this report isn't the first effort that's been done. So there's been numerous efforts done from the Department of Energy and a variety of programs in there, as well as other governmental agencies. And again, the list goes far beyond even what's listed on this slide. But the important piece is that a lot of work has been done getting our arms wrapped around the distribution system. And our goal for the roadmap is to, or the goal for our report is to build off of these prior efforts and just bring more specificity to the system, really help us understand better, what do these transitions look like, again, and what unique cyber risks are coming along with that, and what we can do about it. And so what came out of these reports was an action in the bipartisan infrastructure law that passed again in 2021. And so in that report, section 40121, subsection C, Congress asked that a report be delivered by the Department of Energy in consultation with the Homeland Security Office to really look into some of these threads, and specifically to look at priorities, policies, procedures, and actions associated with this transformation. And again, not just the large distribution systems and components, but also things that are behind the meter. Again, stuff that individual companies or private citizens own. And then beyond setting those priorities, policies, procedures, and actions is also understanding the cost-benefit trade-offs, right? So as all of these, there's risk embedded in the system, and we have to manage that. We have to kind of optimize the way in which we're going to manage that risk. And so the report, again, into understanding this area is going to be looking at these cost-benefit trade-offs. So how are we going about that? So the team is really centered around three core activities in creating this report. So one is convening and gathering input, right? And so we at the National Labs are working hand in hand with folks from the private sector, from federal government, state government, trade associations, anyone that is really involved in this. We want to hear from you. We want to be involved. We want to get your thoughts. We want to get all of that worked in the report. We want this report to be as accurate as we possibly can make it. And so from that input, then we're producing a report. And again, my colleague Jordan Henry will be speaking on that in a moment. And then following that, obviously, there's going to be continuous series of briefings like these webinars and seminars, and a variety of events and a variety of communication products that'll be coming out talking about this report. And again, we're hoping that that is the best possible effort we can from all of us to really explain this situation. So at NREL, how are we actually going about this? And so we have federal advisory boards that are helping us guide this at the executive level to make sure that we keep this on track with other administration priorities and goals and the intent of this language. And then also we have a whole series of engagements to varying capacity on the technical review level. And so these are folks who are working with us very frequently, even to those, they are only able to spend small amounts of time to send comments, to join webinars, raise questions, things of that nature. And we're taking all of these different engagements and then merging that in to the National Lab team, again, that is pulling all of this information in towards developing this report and delivering it here in 2023. So with that, so that we can really dive into the report and a little bit more of the details and parameters that we're focused on so that you can better help us and get involved, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague and the NREL Chief Cybersecurity Engineer, Jordan Henry.
Great, thanks, John, and thanks, Mara. Again, Jordan Henry, Chief Cyber Engineer at NREL. Have the pleasure of leading the National Laboratory team and actually compiling, distilling, and developing the content for the congressional report here on cybersecurity for distribution systems. It's a real honor for me as a power engineer doing cybersecurity for almost 15 years. It's a real opportunity for us to, for once, kind of get ahead of the cybersecurity curve and try to be more proactive in, not only the sector but the government's approach. Next slide. All right, so what's sort of the focus here of the report? Obviously, we're talking about cybersecurity for the electrical distribution system. And essentially what we mean by that and how we're approaching this for the report is anything from the distribution substation all the way down to behind the meter, and then any interfaces to the electric distribution system that may exist. Think of anything to the bulk electric system, other aggregators, OEMs, in some cases, maybe even ratepayer systems themselves. And so it's really a wide net that we're casting here because the challenges are that broad. Within that, we're really focused on kind of the operational technology or the OT side of cybersecurity. So not really looking at utility enterprise as we would traditionally see it in the bulk electric system, though admittedly it's increasingly difficult to distinguish between those two. But we are looking at IT as it relates to system reliability and how it interfaces with OT to support system reliability. Also within the congressional language is looking at physical security. And so the overwhelming focus for the report is cybersecurity. However, we know we can't decouple necessarily cybersecurity from physical security. And so we will be addressing physical security as it relates to the cybersecurity aspects of the distribution system. And then last, we're really looking at these challenges, not just the system that we have today, but really honing in on a time frame or time horizon of 2030. So trying to get ahead, right, and ensure that the policies, procedures, and actions and the recommendations that come out of this report have some relevance well into the future, right, given the changes in the system and the transformation as it exists today. And 2030 was a fairly good time horizon as it gave us some confidence and be able to project where the distribution system might be and what some of the key changes will be, but not too far to make that analysis less confident. Next slide. So some of the key trends that we're looking at here that are really driving some of the direction for the report and the narrative that you'll see here on the next slide. But we're really looking at the distribution system less as a distributor of electrons, right, during the last mile down to load, and really thinking about distribution right well into the future as more of an integration system, right? Integrating devices that are both load and generators of electricity. We're also looking at market and policy forces that are driving grid edge adoption, such as DERs, where grid reliability is increasingly reliant on non-utility owned devices and systems. So some of those could be behind the meter devices, some of those might be aggregators of those devices, et cetera. But it's clear that some of the trajectories that we're on is that non-utility owned devices will be having a larger and larger role in maintaining grid reliability. This also drives an increase in the need for various stakeholders, which are much larger and broader at the distribution system level than what we're used to seeing at the bulk electric system level, and the need for those stakeholders to exchange more information. Some of that directly related to monitoring and control. So those interchanges, right, are key areas that we're trying to address from a cybersecurity perspective. And then all of this is then also driving the interdependence between various critical infrastructures. And so while the electric distribution system is the focus, we're also looking at the interdependencies that might exist between the various infrastructures, right, as CESER has that focus as well. Next slide. So like I said, a privilege to be leading NREL and the other national labs and doing the content development. The key thing to note here is that the national labs, right, are really important in compiling input from across the sector. The electric distribution system, there are many, many stakeholders, right, that need input on. And for this report to be valuable and impactful, our main purpose is really compiling and distilling that information from across the sector, analyzing that input, and then providing the content and authoring the report on the other end. So the national labs really are facilitator here, right, to kind of get this conversation going about cybersecurity amongst all of these different stakeholders, which traditionally haven't discussed uniquely this problem before. Next slide. All right, and so where are we at and what's the story that we're trying to tell? The report here is sort of broken up into, you see these various sections here, and really our goal within the National Laboratory team, though we're very adept at publishing technical reports, right, that are very detailed. The goal here is a little bit different. We're really trying to really characterize a lot of the problems and tell a story in a way that's relatable by a broad audience and can be used by Congress to develop policy or other decisions. And so to do that, we're gonna start off with a bit of a prologue, so a short anecdote that really provides a relatable message that's more receptive by a broad community to really understand what are the key challenges we have, what's unique about distribution cybersecurity as it relates to the bulk electric system or other critical infrastructures, and really highlight some of those grand challenges we face. From there, we'll build upon that story as kind of contextualizing the rest of the report. And the first section is really kind of discussing how we got here from a cybersecurity perspective at the distribution level. And so here, what we're really just trying to do is answer a question is, what is the current state of distribution cybersecurity? So that's the key message that we're trying to drive here in really understanding what are the key challenges that we have today. And then the next section, really trying to extrapolate out what are the challenges, right, that we might see in 2030. So that's the crystal ball, and trying to understand what are the key trends that we're seeing from the distribution system perspective, and what are the cybersecurity implications given those changes. From there, identifying from all the input, right, given the changes that we're seeing, trying to codify a list of grand challenges associated with cybersecurity for distribution. So here, if there's one thing that we want to be able to provide in this report is a real detailed characterization of the challenges, right, that exist given the transformation, and why cybersecurity is an increasingly important part to grid reliability given the direction and the trends that we see. And so there's a real key component in understanding those grand challenges and again, providing that detail that makes it very easily understandable despite the complexity, right, the challenges that we face into the future. And then from there, this is a really key aspect of the report, I believe, and trying to then take that message, right, that yes, given these transformation, the energy transformation that we're seeing, given the fairly rapid pace of change, relatively speaking, that we're seeing at the distribution level, how can we change the narrative from just understanding these changes from a challenge perspective and really flipping on its head and saying, what are the opportunities that we have given this transformation? What are the things that we can do and take advantage of this, right, such that when we move to a more open, interconnected system with more stakeholders exchanging more information, how can we ensure that that system is actually more resilient to cyber attack, right, than the system we have today? So it's a real key narrative that we're trying to do and really put a spin of, what are the key things can really make a difference in cybersecurity. And then the last stage of that is really talking about more of the implementation, right? How do we prioritize through cost benefit analyses? How do we identify public-private partnerships on our way to get there? and what are potential cost sharing opportunities given the relative stakeholders, increase in stakeholders that we're seeing at the distribution system level. So we're hoping that in combination of all this, right, we can tell that story clearly and concisely and give the sector and Congress, right, the tools they need, the information they need to be able to make intelligent decisions about how can we have the greatest impact in reducing cybersecurity risk to the U.S. electric distribution system. All right, next slide.
Great. Thanks, Jordan, and thank you, Mara, for your words and remarks today. Again, on behalf of all of us working on this and the Office of Cybersecurity, Energy Security, and Emergency Response, we're excited to hear from you. We want you to get involved. We want to get all of our best thoughts into this report because this system is changing so rapidly. It's so important that, again, the security and resilience be designed in and we be as thoughtful as possible about how we do that. And again, we need your help. And so please reach out to us working on this report. Please join and sign up for our email list, as we will be putting out a series of webinars as we continue to develop and build this report, and any other way in which we can hopefully get you involved. And so with that, again, I'll thank my fellow speakers and thank you all for joining.